Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Trade Squad. Leah and Audrey are here. If you missed part one, Despina is here as our guest on the Trade Squad. Go back to part one to hear a little bit more about her background. But we are diving into our next topic, which is how outbreaks affect supply chains globally. I mean, this is a huge topic right now. The coronavirus, I think, every time I turn on the TV or I'm opening up LinkedIn, I mean, it's such a huge topic right now, the Australian bushfires. Leah, I'm going to turn it over to you because this was a topic that you really wanted to talk about. So let's dive in.
Yeah, I actually think, to your point, if you missed part one, this ties into it quite a bit.
Yeah.
I was just really intrigued by what would be the challenges if you were a business that was reliant on Australia as a customer base, as a commodity partner. So looking at some of the information around what's happening over there, the ground shipping has been hugely affected with highway shutdowns and access to the ports. That's been a really big issue. Australia is a commodity dependent economy, so it's been a huge impact there. And then just kind of considering all the different ways that it's impacted, the partnerships with your Australian partners go way beyond access to the ports. It really is looking at things like honey production apparently has dropped substantially since the fires, dairy production. It's had an impact on mining because of power outages. So when all of this stuff is happening and you are reliant on partnership with, Australia in any way, it's a domino effect, obviously. Yeah. And as we were talking in the earlier episode, when you're a smaller business in particular, how well prepared you are to pivot or adapt to those major impacts that will have a long-term effect on what you're doing from a business standpoint can be a big wake-up call. So I just wanted to put out to the group with this particular incident, although coronavirus is now the next really great example of these major unexpected natural disasters that have a huge impact on business. And how do you prepare for that? I think, interestingly, technology obviously plays a role there. But I wanted to get the group's thoughts on, what have you heard from clients that are working in that market, or what are the impacts of these major natural disasters, and how do you prepare yourself?
Yeah, and I want to ask Despina about that in just a minute. But I know with the coronavirus, I did some research, and they were talking about like Apple has closed stores in the region. Like, think about how much money is being lost from, such a case as the coronavirus.
Right.
And, ocean and air freight has been canceled from that region. But to bring a more human perspective to it, so I was on the phone with somebody the other day who lives in Shenzhen, and she was in Vietnam, and she is like, I can't go home.
Oh, wow.
And we're so lucky that her business, and I believe her husband's business as well, is remote. So they're able to work kind of from anywhere, although they're still displaced. Their inventory is made in China, and so that's going to be affected. But literally, I said, where do you go from here? Like, what do you do? And she was like, well, we're going to stay in Vietnam for a couple of days, and then we might have to go to Thailand. But she's like, we are probably not going to be able to get home for months.
Oh, my God. Can you imagine?
Yeah, I know we're talking about the supply chain aspect and what that's going to do to business and the money that's going to be lost and things like that. But to put the human perspective on it and to really think about the people that are being affected by this, this isn't the last time. This isn't the first time.
100%.
So, we're all reacting at this point, but how do we be proactive for next time? So Despina, I want to throw it over to you, because being in the shipping industry, you must have been affected, or, at least what you're doing and the people that you're connected to and talking to. Like, how is shipping being affected by these humongous world impact issues?
Well, it's a major problem as for everyone. I've been reading some reports today that some very big companies, European and American companies, retailers, have closed as many as 1/3 of their shops in China. So that will have a huge impact on them for the sales of this year, but also for their employees, because we're talking about the human factor as well.
Yeah.
We have heard stories of, for example, cruise ships that are outside ports and they are not allowed to come in because there are coronavirus outbreak on board, and there are many difficulties for the people on board the ships. There's big worry about the crews on merchant ships. Again, they're not allowed off ships, and it's really it's a really sad situation, because we also need to see how it affects them mentally and their welfare as well. Right. But what was very interesting was that I was reading another article today, and it was saying that maybe it's time to restructure the whole supply chain. There were even some calls of, maybe we move a lot of the manufacturing that's happening in Asia back to Europe or to Northern America, and really the implications of that, it's not as easy as it sounds. Obviously, and the cost that this will come with such an idea or such a move. What surprises me, though, is that it's not the first time we've had such issues. We've had SARS a few years before, and of course the fires. It's something very sad, but it's something that is not new. And what surprises me is how unprepared we are every time. And I really don't know what needs to happen. I think this is a bigger discussion. It's not a discussion that can only happen on national level, but it's a discussion that must happen on an international level in the big organizations, because there should be a plan, a bigger scale plan, for us to be able to help, obviously, the countries that are more affected by this, but also to see how we can prevent cases like this in the future.
Well, and I just wonder, we talk about this happening in China, we talk about this happening in Australia, and moving, manufacturing. But who's to say that it's not going to happen in Europe? And who's to say that it's not going to happen in North America? So you're right, one of the questions that I had that I wanted to pose to the group was, how do we plan for this in supply chains? How do we be better prepared? Because like you said, this is not the first time, this is the kind of our new normal. We don't know when it's going to happen, and it could happen anywhere. So how do we prepare for this? How do we plan for this?
Can I be a bit maybe radical on, for things like viruses, though? Fires and natural disasters, which, if you're keeping up on anything related to climate change, are just going to be impending. But specifically on things like viruses, and we have a lot of cultures where we prioritize being in the office or doing your job before anything else. So when you see people getting sick, but like, I have to go to work, there's no safety net. If I don't go to work, I don't get paid. I'm homeless. We can't pay our bills. So when you're in a situation like that and you have a virus that's quite contagious and has a long incubation period, I mean, even the details don't matter. But if it's contagious and you're going to work anyways, and you're interacting with all of your coworkers, and then if you're public facing too, I mean, fundamentally, we may want to have some sort of question about, is our ambitious work at no cost, at any cost culture, maybe a bit of a factor in that.
And Audrey, what you're saying, I think what Audrey is saying is very important, and it goes to the bigger picture as well. Because Sarah, you were saying, how can we protect ourselves, or how can we change the supply chain so we're better prepared next time? But really, I don't know what the answer is to that, because the margins are so small that I don't know who can put a provision for something like that so big. And still, I mean, it really comes down to business. And I don't know how well prepared we are, or how well prepared we can ever be for that.
Yeah.
Or if our priorities are kind of compassionate to the human experience, or if we're just, what's the bottom line and everybody needs to be at work, and then, oh, we've created this contagious virus disaster because we all showed up to work.
Yeah,
exactly.
But I mean, in terms of natural disasters and things like that, I mean, there's certain provisions you can make, in the sense of, you can have insurance coverage, you can try your best to plan ahead. And like, I don't think until you start to see an issue, like something like the Australia fires, until you start to see the impact of that, it's hard to really make the call whether you're going to start diverting or start rearranging your plans.
Yeah.
So there is that, like, when it's, you do have to start to see it become an issue. But at the same time, if you can accept that, now my goods are maybe stuck in Australia, so I'm not going to have my Australia portion of goods, or I'm not going to have my, California portion of good. California's had some really bad wildfires too. I mean, disasters like that. Jamaica had an earthquake, just at the beginning of January, so it's, if you can have tolerance for these sort of out of control experiences. But when you have customers and it's like, my store shelves are empty, I have to have something on the shelves, you start to lose that human connection with what's happening.
Right.
Well, and to just jump on that a little bit, are there critical thinking skills that we need to look for in our supply chain teams to be able to think about and be more prepared? Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like,
it's kind of a leadership thing. It's kind of it's a fine line of when am I going to make the call that this isn't going to happen?
Yeah.
Versus how are we going to just keep trying to throw everything at this to push it through and make it happen? Or when am I going to step back and just make the call and be like, look, this situation is out of control. There's really no options for us here. We have to completely regroup on this. And that's, I think, where leadership and I wouldn't want to be the person making that call all the time. But I think that's where it's like, you get everyone ramped up to everyone's going to problem solve something, but then you're like, sometimes you can't problem solve your way out of a fire, right? You can't problem solve your way out of a virus. In a lot of or you can't expect the thing that you were trying to make happen may not happen. So then you really have to figure out what your alternatives are and be willing to have some agility with, okay, this is not happening. What is plan X, Y, and Z at this point?
Yeah. Final thoughts, Leah?
Well, I just was going to say, I mean, everybody has brought such great perspectives to the equation because it's so tough. And because I work with small business, I'm looking at it from that perspective. And I noticed with Australia, as an example, there was a social media movement all around trying to support small businesses and saying with the fires, these small businesses are decimated if they can't continue to have a customer base, and wanted to really indicate how they wanted to grow the visibility to their customers overseas. But then, just like was pointed out, it's not a single solution, because just because you've now indicated that you want to grow the business, can you get the product over there? And then similarly, we have small business here that, have commodities that they utilize from the Australian market. And while it might be easier to say, well, we'll just get that from Vietnam now, if you've got a relationship with someone there and the human equation is part of your consideration, how do you help build around that or work with that? So there's just so much to it. And to Despina's point, can it easily be solved just through thinking ahead? I don't know if it really ever can, just because there's so much cost and effort and things that go into it for a smaller company anyway, that it just is one of those challenges you have to deal with as it comes up maybe.
Awesome. Well, great conversation, ladies, and we'll see you in part 3.